1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. To most of us, that's not what counting on our fingers looks like. To the Chinese, they would know what I'm signaling, but most likely would not know what I'm saying. Nonverbal communication is a very important way of how we interact with others. According to rpi.edu, a study done in the United States showed that 93% of a message was transmitted through tone of voice and facial expressions. It can be very difficult to nonverbally communicate across various cultures. The Chinese are group dependent and strive for harmony, so they depend on tone of voice, facial expression, and posture to communicate their emotions. Asian nonverbal communication is especially intriguing because it differs so much from our American way of communicating in our culture. Body language is a very important part of nonverbal communication. When we point at objects, we use a finger. We'll point at something to show somebody what we're talking about. We might point at them or ask them to come here with our finger. We might also ask them to come with our entire hand. The Japanese actually find that disrespectful, and they compare it to beckoning a dog. So they actually do not point with a finger. They actually point with their entire hand and with their palm down. In normal communication, it's pretty typical for us in our culture to walk up to somebody and give them a quick hug when we greet them if we feel comfortable enough, or shake their hand. We also might touch somebody's arm while we're speaking or while they're speaking to show that we're paying attention. The Japanese are very uncomfortable with any physical contact, so they don't maintain any kind of contact when speaking. They have actually adhered to shaking hands when greeting somebody because it's such a universally used gesture. So they do shake hands with each other and with people across cultures because they recognize that as a way of greeting. Hand gestures can also be so different across cultures. For example, this to us means A-okay, but to the Japanese it means money. So one gesture means two totally different things in a couple different cultures. And that's only two cultures. Imagine any other culture across the world. It could mean something totally different to them as well. So it's important to understand that using a hand gesture could come off as disrespectful or inappropriate in some cultures. If it's not exactly what you think it means, it may mean something to somebody else. Asian cultures are more restrained cultures, and they tend to see our culture as being a little crazy and maybe lacking in restraint and lacking in manners, whereas our culture kind of sees their more restrained way of communicating as lacking emotion and not being very interesting just because of the difference in how we communicate. So you can see that just even our general way of communicating can mean something totally different to another culture. Facial expressions are also a really important part of communicating and non-verbally getting our messages across. Chinese and Japanese really try to not show any emotion, especially in public. They want to avoid misunderstanding, and they want to keep their privacy. So it's important to them that they don't show a lot of emotion, whereas we're very apt to show a lot of emotion when we're speaking with each other. For example, a smile to us means happiness and being overjoyed, and we actually, a lot of times I think we think that a smile anywhere, any country across any culture can kind of mean happiness, but actually in some Southeast Asian cultures, it means that they're hiding pain or maybe hiding embarrassment. So just when you thought something across the culture might mean something that's the same, it actually still has a different meaning. So it's important to understand that when communicating with other cultures. Eye contact is probably one of the biggest differences in nonverbal communication across cultures. For us, it's really important to look somebody in the eye. We're taught to look somebody in the eye when speaking. And right now, as I give this presentation, I'm trying to maintain eye contact with my audience. It's important to us to look somebody in the eye. It means respect and honesty to us. Where in most Asian cultures, it actually is disrespectful to look somebody in the eye. You must look down and not have any eye contact with the person you're speaking with because they see it as rude. For example, in this picture that I have, I kind of compare the two. The two men here are using hand gestures and speaking across the table to each other, and they're maintaining eye contact. Whereas in an Asian culture, when greeting each other, they're looking down. And the one man has his hand out to shake his hand, but they will not maintain any kind of eye contact when speaking. Also, in normal conversation, we will tend to maybe interrupt each other or finish each other's sentences and kind of be loose in our conversation with people, especially in a casual conversation. where in Japanese cultures, they're very formal no matter what the conversation. They find it very rude to interrupt each other at any time, and you must always wait your turn to speak. I know in our culture there are times when we think that interrupting is rude, like in the classroom or in some kind of meeting where you maybe have a speaker or you're listening to somebody. It is seen as rude to interrupt. So there are those similarities, but in the Japanese culture, it's across all communication, even casual communication. So it's important to know that you must always wait your turn to speak when speaking in the Asian culture. General etiquette is also very interesting. I found it interesting to, like gift giving, for example. These pictures show giving gifts, and the American side here, the girl is giving her boyfriend or husband a gift. She's kind of closing his eyes and presenting him with a gift to surprise him. Where in the Asian culture, here, the woman is presenting the gift to the other woman with both of her hands. That's one big difference, is they always present their gifts with both hands to each other. Another important thing is, according to the USA Today Chinese Culture Guide, don't present a gift in black, white, or blue wrapping paper gift bags. And also don't gift flowers, handkerchiefs, or clocks, because the Asian culture actually relates that to funerals. So just when you thought you were giving them a happy, joyous gift, they might actually relate it to being sad and sorrowful just because of what that meaning conveys. Also, avoid sets of 4. That's an unlucky number to the Asian culture, and try for sets of 8, because that's their lucky number. So they kind of have those types of superstitions just like we do. And so always avoid groups of 4, because they see that as very unlucky. Sitting is also really interesting. When you walk into your friend's house or you walk into a classroom, you usually just plop down in the seat that you see most comfortable or where you want to be in the room. Whereas in Asian cultures, you must always wait to be asked where to sit and when to sit. They always tell you where they want you to sit and when you should sit down. So it's generally accepted to just walk in and wait and stay standing until they tell you where they want you to sit. One thing I thought of was, in our culture, when you're in church, you're kind of asked to sit up and stand down at certain times, but that's just one part of our culture that is a little bit similar. But other than that, mostly we just sit down when we want, and it's quite a bit different than the Asian culture. Greeting is also interesting. I said earlier that the Asian cultures have adhered to shaking hands when greeting. One thing that is similar between our culture and their culture is shaking hands when greeting each other. However, they also, when they greet each other, a lot of times they bow. So in this picture I'm kind of showing, this one's kind of a funny picture where the girl would just like to say hello and shake his hand, but the man's culture shows bowing, because that's what he has learned when greeting each other, that he should bow in respect to greeting somebody. And then in this picture over here, President Obama is actually bowing to an Asian man. So he's showing his respect by going across cultures and bowing for the man on the left. So, many of us might not ever get the chance to experience nonverbal communication in our everyday life. If you don't get a chance to travel to another country, you might not ever experience it. But it's still important to understand that the way you read somebody may be totally different in another person's perspective. There are more than 700,000 possible motions we can make without even speaking. So it can mean so many different things to so many different people, especially considering all the cultures in our world. Nonverbal communication it really is the most important way we convey information to each other, and I think it's even more important than the words we say.